Hi everybody, shall we start? So, one thing regarding the project, so I think you got the feedback now on the proposal, so I think pretty much everybody was okay. So there had been some comments regarding the problem you had discussed and things that you have you might have not mentioned in the proposal. So those things have been indicated in the feedback, so make sure that you address them when you are preparing the progress briefing. So some of you again asked how is the template for progress briefing. You basically need to follow the instruction on Kirkus, but I'm going to put you one extra announcement, hopefully by tomorrow. And that's about this. I think nothing else should be mentioned. No, that's it. So if there is no question, then let's go for CNNs again. So so we actually ended up last session somewhere here. So we discussed about this convolutional neural network, and we said that the key factor about convolutional neural network is that we want to just deal with things which have visual contexts. So we had this particular example where we wanted to just train a neural network which could just detect one MNIST or classify one MNIST image which is located somewhere within a bigger background. Yeah? And we talked about it if we want to just do a naive classification or naively train a feed-forward neural network, then we're going to have a kind of big neural network. It needs too many inputs, so we're going to have much larger inputs, so much larger neural network. But that was not the only issue that we had. So we said if we go ahead and train the neural network on this data set, where we have all those MNIST images being put somewhere on the top left corner, then when we give a new sample into this neural network with the number or the digit being on the bottom right corner, then most probably that neural network is not going to classify it right. And the main reason is that it gets trained in a way to just look at that part of your image, right? And then we talked about this, that this is not actually a very cool idea, and if we want to just get rid of that issue, probably we need to go for data augmentation, just adding too many images of shifted version, rotated version in the same background. This, theoretically resolve our issue, but the main problem is still there, which is the complexity, because we need to just get like a very huge neural network trained on so many data, because every single image now inside MNIST is going to have thousands of replicates, and all of those replicas are different shape or different position of the same image. So it's going to be a huge problem. So we came up with a better idea. The better idea was that we get one neural network which already has been trained to just classify one MNIST image. And then we get this one, then the thing that we do is that we take the input image and then we try to scan it, right? So start from top left corner, and then we get 28 by 28 pixel part of the image. We just check whether we have one specific class, and then we keep on going till the whole image is over, right? And then at the end of the day, this guy could do the job for us. It has no problem as such we had with like naive FNN, the big one. And also it doesn't need data augmentation anymore, which is resolving many issues for us. So now we still can just have this small dimensional FNN, and also we have a sort of shift invariance, because this number 3 is not really important where it is in the background. You can always find it when you scan the whole background. Okay? So that was the idea. And as I told you, we ended up here. And as I told you, this thing that is just sliding over this background, this input image. This is what we call it filter, and the whole operation we are doing here is a simple version of the convolution, which we are going to learn today. Okay? So, in a simple word, so what a CNN does, CNN basically extract feature, a convolutional neural network, basically looks at one input image, and then tries to go over it, and then tries to extract features out of this image. Yeah? Now, this action, extracting features out of the image, is being done by the filter. So the filter is the thing that you are just passing through your image, as I said. And the scanning procedure has one specific name. We call it convolution. So this action that you get one filter and then you just slide it over your input image, this is what you do. You call it convolution. I mean, it has connection to the idea of convolution that some of you had in signal processing. Same thing. I mean, you are doing it here over the image. In like basic signal processing, you do it over a time signal, right? So same thing. Index of the image here is the time there. Yeah, and if you just do the one-to-one connection or one-to-one mapping, then you're going to see that this convolution is the two-dimensional case of that convolution. Okay? This is what we call a convolution, and it is basically a linear operation because you get one filter, you just multiply it into one part of your image, and then you add them up. So it's basically like the linear operation we used to do in basic FNN. And how we can look at this CNN, I mean, this CNN is not a kind of totally new thing. I mean, we're going to do it a bit later after we get clear about the components of CNN, and you would see that CNN is simply a giant FNN, yeah? But it has some key features that helps you train it much better or much easier. The key features are that you are using the same weights for many inputs, because if you look at this intuitive example I gave you, you get the same filter, you put it on one part of image, then you get exactly same filter, and then you put it in second part of the image, right? So you are not going to update the weights anymore. So that they are the same weights. So this is what we call it local, we call it, yes, sort of, I don't have the names, right? Oh, yeah, we're going to see it later. So this is what we call it shared parameters inside your neural network. And this CNN is not fully connected anymore. It's locally connected. And we're going to see it, as I told you, again later in the next part of the course, this chapter. So now that you have a basic understanding of what CNN does and how it is, let's now build a kind of practical CNN, or not practical CNN, but something that you do already have idea on. So the thing that I want to do is just align with your first assignment. So in the first assignment that you did, you just trained one perceptron, if you remember, in assignment 1, right? And probably at that point you were so annoyed by this particular experiment. Why should we do this? But I just gave it because I wanted to use it today. Okay? So what did we do in that assignment? You had this, dummy data set. You just made this 3x3 image, and we had this pattern of X, right? So 3x3 pixel image, 9 pixels in total, and then we had the pattern X, and this guy was labeled by 1, right? Anything else was labeled by 0, correct? And then you train that perceptron. It was a simple linearly separable problem. So you could just train the perceptron such that when you give any image, if it is really the X pattern, it's going to give you 1. But any other image, when you give it to your perceptron, it's going to give you 0, right? Now, before I go on, I just want to make sure a few things, just recall a few things. So I give X into my neuron, my perceptron. This is the perceptron, and I'm going to get 1. What does it mean? I mean, how does this perceptron work? It's going to go over this X. So this X is the 3-dimensional thing, right? 9-dimensional input. So So you're going to give this one, this is your first input, right? So you're going to make your x, and your x looks like x1, x2, and so on until x9, right? This is your x, and this is exactly the guy, correct? And now you're going to, x1 is exactly this guy, x2 is this one, x3 is the next one, and so on until the last guy, correct? Right? Now, how does your perceptron does the classification? It's going to get x1 to x9, multiply each of them with the corresponding weight, right? W1, W2 till W9. So you multiply them. Then you're going to, and you add a bias. So it means that at the end of the day, you have summation of Wi, xi, I runs from 1 to 9, plus b. And this guy is what? Is your affine transform, correct? So you're going to get a z. Now, this z guy, what do you do next with that when you pass it through a perceptron? You just check the sign, correct? So if you see 1, it means that z is positive. If you get 0, it means that z is negative, correct? Right? Now, you train it in a way that when you give x to it, it's going to give you 1. Correct? And if you give anything else, it's going to give you 0. Meaning that if you just look at the output before activation, if you give x, that one is positive. Anything else is negative. Everybody's on the same page? Everybody's clear? Cool. So now what I want to do, I want to just use this neural network that we trained in assignment 1 to just find out if I have one particular, longer, grid page where I have the pattern X in it. I want to be able to just detect or recognize that pattern X inside a larger image. Clear? And my pattern, for the moment, is 3 by 3. Clear? Everybody's clear what I want to do? So basically, I have this 10 by 10 image, and I do know that, it could be one 3 by 3 X within that 10 by 10 image, and I want to be able to just find out whether that 10 by X exists in this 10 by 10 image or not. Okay? How can I do it? I basically do the same thing as we did before. Yeah? So I'm going to get your assignment 1 perceptron and put it here. Then this guy is just describing a 3 by 3 filter for me. So those weights that you computed in your assignment, W1 to W9, I'm going to put them in that order in the filter. Correct? And then the thing that I'm going to do, I'm going to put it like in the top left corner. Then I multiply W1 with the first pixel there on the bigger image. Correct? So W1 going to get multiplied with that one, W2 with the next pixel, W3 with the next pixel, W4 with a pixel below in the second row, first column. You see it, right? So I just put that filter exactly at that part of image and multiply every single weight with a corresponding pixel value. Correct? Everybody's clear what I'm doing? And then once I multiply them, I sum them up. I add the bias and pass it through the step function. This is the perceptron, correct? Now, if I put my filter there and do this, what do I get? 0. Why? Because that is not the X pattern. And you do know that your perceptron is going to give you 0 for that other pattern, right? You just made your data set in a way that any other image is going to get classified as 0, correct? Now, if I go for the next one, what's going to be output? 0 again. Next one, and so on. So if I keep on going, I always get 0, correct? Here also 0, but what about the next one now? It's going to be 1, correct? And if I keep on going, it's going to be 0. If I keep on going down, what's going to happen? It's always 0, correct? So when I do that, at the end of the day, I'm going to get something like this. Yeah? So everything here is 0 but this guy. And if I OR everything on this map on the right-hand side, I can detect X, pattern X, inside the original image. Correct? Yeah? Great. So what I did here, I got my filter, and then I just slided it over this image by stride 1. Do you know why I say stride 1? Yes, exactly. So because when I started here, each time that I wanted to slide my filter, I'm just sending it one step forward, right? I'm not skipping any pixel in between, correct? So I start here, so I'm on the first column, first row, and then I go for the second column, first row still, and I keep on going like this. When I'm over with the whole columns, then I start here, I just skip one line, right? I just go to the second row. This is what I call it stride 1, correct? Now, I did it by stride 1, and I got this guy. So if I do that as I told you, and I just do XOR of this map, what I'm going to get at the output is 1, which tells me that pattern X exists in the larger image, correct? Now, one thing that I did here was that I got this guy, I passed it through my perceptron, I activated the output of my perceptron, and then I put it on the map, correct? But I don't really need to activate it. Why? Because look at this guy. Now, if I do not do the activation, so I just compute the affine transform. So you remember here what we talked initially, right? So if the output of the perceptron is 1, it means the affine transform is positive. If it is 0, it is negative, correct? Now, if I just remove that activation here, and then I look at that part of the image and give it to my affine transform, what do I see? A negative value, correct? Now, if I slide it right, it's going to be still negative, correct? I can keep on going, it's always negative until I get into this point, correct? And at that point, this is positive. Now, if I keep on going, then I am going to have such a map, right? Everything is negative, just one of them is positive, and that is exactly the place where the X pattern exists, correct? Now, if I do this, and after that I just compute the maximum value of everything here, and then I do the step function, what's going to happen? I still get 1, correct? So still I detect the X pattern, correct? So what I get here is going to be the same thing as I did in the previous slide for you, yeah? Doing activation right after every single transform. Clear? So I really don't need to just activate every single computation here, but what I can do, I can just do the whole convolution. I get these positive and negative values, and then I do the maximization. This I can do as well. Nothing going to change. Now, what you get here usually, this is what we call it the feature map. So you're looking at this guy, and then you're just going over different parts of this image. Each time that you go, you compute one number. That number could be a different number, yes? It could be a real valued number, correct? So you compute those real valued numbers, and then you just collect all of them into a matrix. This matrix is talking about your original image, but it's not the image itself anymore, right? It's a bunch of numbers which are proportional to finding out whether the X pattern exists or not. So these are features of your original image. Yeah? So you're extracting them, and you're keeping them in this map, which we call it a feature map. Yeah? So what you do usually in convolution, you get your image, you get a filter, you just slide that filter over that image, and each time that you go over it, you're going to multiply everything inside your filter with those particular pixels on that particular part of the image, which we call it receptive field. That particular field of the image, you just multiply your filter with that one, you compute one number, and you write it down on the feature map on the right side. No? When you are over with all of it, you're going to have a map of numbers, a matrix of numbers, and that is what we call it the feature map. So basically what the convolution does is that it gets one image. It uses a filter to just extract a map of features. Everybody's clear? Yep. Now, what I'm going to do from now on, I am going to just show it by this conv. So I'm going to give to this convolution operation my image, and then this image is being slided by the filter, and then for now I'm going to put the stride number as well. So by stride equal by 1, I mean simply that each time I'm just passing one step forward or one step down. Correct? This is stride 1. Clear? Everybody's clear? So, and I'm going to use this notation from now on. Yeah? So I give my image to this convolution, and then it's going to give me at the output the feature map that you see this side of the slide. Yes?
So what does feature exactly mean?
Feature is somehow related to this property that you are looking for. I mean, it depends what kind of filter and what kind of application you are looking for. But if you want to think about one image, for example, you want to detect image of an animal, and then you have different classes, then through time the filter is going to be trained to give you values that are corresponding to the different part of the animal. So the ears, nose, eye. Yeah. So it's going to extract that, but we're going to talk about it in more details. Right now, you could say feature is just a linear combination of some part of the image. And depending on the filter that you choose, you could extract different features. Yeah? Any questions? Yep.
So it's like its stride was 2, right?
I'm going to show you next slide. No worries. Okay. Great. So that's it. Now, as your friend asked, what if we do it by stride 2? So if I want to do the convolution with a stride 2, what do you think? Where should W1 start next time? Where should it be? Where W3 right now is, right? If I want to just slide with the stride 2, what do? I just jump 2 Ys, right? Clear? So I'm here, so I'm on column 1. Then the next column that I'm going to start in the next scan is going to be column 3, correct? So I go on like this till I'm here. Can I go further? No, because if I jump now by step 2, then I'm going to get out of the input, correct? So I'm going to go next for the next part. But what is the next part? So I'm going to just come down 2 pixels. Clear? So when I say stride 2, it means that every time that I move, I take a step 2, right? So step 2 forward, and then when you are over, you just jump 2 steps down, and you start and keep on going. Everybody's clear? Yep. So this is going to be convolution by stride 2. And one thing, when I increase the stride, what's going to happen to the feature map? It's going to get smaller, correct? So when I'm increasing the stride, because I'm scanning, faster, I'm scanning with less resolution, my original image, so it means that I'm collecting less features, so my feature map is going to get smaller. Clear? Yep. Great. So that is going to be this, and in general, you can do this convolution by any stride of any integer stride. So if I want to just formulate the convolution now for you, what I can say for the moment, let's think of 2-dimensional convolution. I mean, single channel convolution. You're going to see multi-channel as well, hopefully today. So say I have a filter which is of size f times f, okay? My filter is of size f by f. And it means that it has f rows, it has f columns. You can simply think of it as a matrix right now, okay? So I have this filter which is f by f. We also call it kernel. And then I have one image which is of size n by n. And of course, n should be larger than f. So this guy is my x. So this guy is x. This is w. Now this guy is n by n, or yeah, n by n right now. Okay, this is n. And here you have also n. Okay? Now, when you want to do the convolution with the stride s, you're going to get this w, you put it here, you multiply everything that is under your filter with your filter values, you sum them up. Yeah? This is your first value. You're going to save it in your feature map, correct? Then you're going to jump with the stride size. You do it again. Stride size till you're over with your image. And then you just come here again, and this time you just jump down with your stride size, right? And you keep on going. So this is going to be the convolution. Now, how you can write it down, you could say, OK, every single feature that I have, so after doing the convolution, so if I do the convolution here, then I am going to get one z. And this z, if I want to, for example, look at the value z11, what it should be w multiplied with this part of the image, right? So I'm going to put w here, and I'm going to multiply it with this part of my image, and then sum it up. This is going to be z11, correct? Now, what I'm going to do, I'm going to call this part of my image x11. So what is x11? For example, just think of I and j here right now, 1 and 1. So nothing is showing up here. So it's going to be x from 1 to f. So this is 1 to f. Here is also 1 to f, correct? So this part, this submatrix of the original matrix is my x11. Now my w get multiplied by x11. It's going to give me z11, right? Now if I want to write z12, what should I do? I should jump with this stride, right? So meaning that I'm not using this part anymore. I'm using another part. And that part starts from which column? S or S plus 1, correct? So it's going to start from, I mean, if a stride is 1, I'm going to 2, right? If a stride is 2, I'm going to 3. If a stride is 4, I'm going to 5, right? So it's going to start from so it's going to be something like this. And then you start from 1 plus s. And it's going to go on till, what would be the last guy? 1 plus s plus f. Perfect. And what is this one? This is still 1 to f, correct? Yeah. So if you want to just go further, each time you're going to get j minus 1. So j is now the index. So here j is 2. But in general, you get j minus 1. You multiply it with s, and then you add 1, correct? And then you're going to go from here. Sorry, here we don't need 1. Sorry. It's going to be s plus f, of course. S plus f. OK? My bad. Sorry. No? So you're going to get up to f plus j minus 1 times s, correct? Yeah? And each time you're going to go further like this. Okay? Now, if you want to now just change the gear on the row, what you're going to do, you're going to do the same thing, but this time you're going to do it on the rows, correct? So, I mean, this is not a very complicated thing. You really don't need to know any of this formula here. The only thing you need to have is that, like image, the visualization in your mind that you have this filter and you are just, sliding it over the same image with fixed stride. Clear? So you're going to do this, and now you get your weight each time. You multiply it with that receptive field of your original input, and then you sum them up. This is going to be your z value. This is your convolution action. Okay? A simple thing, a linear operation. Now, next operation that we have done, if you remember in the couple of previous slides, was that after computing our complete feature map, we got a bunch of numbers which are plus and minus, right? And I told you if you take the maximum value of it out, then that guy is positive, and then you can classify it, correct? Yeah? So what I'm doing, I'm getting a feature, a map of features, and then I'm looking into them. I'm doing one particular operation here, which is maximization. I mean, in general, I can do any operation on them. And then I'm just selecting one particular feature out of it, correct? I'm taking something out of it. This is what we call it pulling, okay? So what I'm doing here, I'm just pulling out that particular positive number out of this feature map. Clear? And the conventional approach is not to just do one particular pulling on this big map. I mean, the conventional approach, as you're going to see in this chapter, is that you're going to get your original feature map and you start to just, like same as the filtering or as convolution, you're going to go over a part of your feature map, you just extract that one. So you're going to look at this guy, you take the maximum, you write it here, which is going to be plus. And you keep on doing it like this till you are over with all the things. And then you're going to get more pluses here as this one. Yeah? You might now wonder why this is like this, but you're going to see through the chapter that this is actually a wise approach. But just as a kind of intuitive description of why we are doing it is because if you look at this guy, it's very spiky feature map. Everything is negative, but one of them, boom, is positive, right? Yeah. What about the other one? No, that is much smoother, right? Bunch of things are negative, and a bunch of things are positive. And you really don't want to do something like this. You don't like these guys because this is very jittery. I mean, here is a dummy example of, X pattern. But when you have a real image, this means that you can just slide a bit of filter, and then you get totally different feature simply because your filter is not yet perfect, right? And to just avoid that, you're going to do the pulling. Okay? So this is what we call it pulling. What I'm doing here is basically a max pulling, which is a very common pulling approach, but you can in general do different kinds of pullings, right?
Yes. The two positive in first row, why do you have them?
Because when I am max pulling, I'm looking at only this part, right? And take the maximum. What is the maximum here? It's a positive, exactly. So it's positive. It's positive, now it's negative, definitely. Yeah? And same thing comes here. So you have 4 different fields where you have a still positive feature. Yeah? So everybody's clear? Great. So now, if you want to have a deep neural or a convolutional neural network, what you're going to do, you're going to get your convolution, you do pulling, you get a new feature map, right? You do again a convolution on that feature map, you do another pulling, you get a new feature map. You keep on doing as much as you need until you end up with a feature map that is somehow extracting everything that you need. And what you're going to do after that with this one? For this one, yes, but say you want to do more advanced thing. Yes, or build another model, right? So what I could do, I could just get this guy, yeah, and put it again in the form of a vector and give it into a new MLP, right? And then I train that MLP to do the job for me, correct? So if I have done good feature extractions during these multiple convolution layers, then that FNN, that MLP, is going to do much better job as compared to the MLP that start from very beginning, right? This is the first thing. And the second thing is that each time that I do the convolution, I'm able to just make the features smaller and smaller, right? So I can end up with a bunch of few features, which are the main features of my original image, and then I start to doing, any processing on that, okay? So this is going to be a general look of a convolutional neural network. So whatever you had in the previous chapters is still there, but it's going to happen after you are over with all the convolution. So you're going to start with one input, and then you do the convolution. You get your filter, you just pass it through your image, and each time you just extract one feature, you write it down on the feature map. Once you have done this, you do some sort of pulling, right? You again get a filter, you pass it through these features, and each time you pull something out of it, right? Once you have done the pulling, you can again repeat the same thing. So you can get the convolution next to it, do the pulling next to it, and do it as much as you need. But finally, at this point, you're ending up with a bunch of features which you can write it down in form of a vector. This is what we call it flattening. Meaning that I get a matrix, a map of features, now I put it in the form of a vector. Okay? I flatten everything. And literally, when you use PyTorch, for example, you just use the function .flat. So it's got flatten, I think. You just really flatten it. Yeah? Make it one array, one-dimensional array. And now you get this flat output, the bunch of features that you have. You give it in one fully connected neural network that you had in the previous chapter. And at the output, you get the class or whatever you want. Clear? So you already know this part, so we don't need to go through it again. The only things that are new now are this convolution, pulling, and flattening, which we're going to do it together today. Okay? But before doing that, anyone has any question on this? Yep.
How do you know when to stop plotting the
Yeah, we really don't know. Yeah, we're going to just do it, all right? But, I mean, we're going to discuss it. I mean, next chapter is about this. So initial intuition is that just go as deep as you could. Because each time you are doing a processing on your feature, you probably are doing it better. But at some point, you get into this issue with gradient vanishing. And how we can get rid of that, this is what comes next. So that is ResNet, which we have in the next chapter, skip connection. But in general, I mean, if you don't get into any practical issue, the best thing is just do as much as you could, you know, until you get really features that you are totally comfortable with. So, any question on that? Okay. So, this is, as I told you, a general architecture for CNN. So in practice, we are going to go for deeper architectures, like more layers of convolution and pooling. And we really do, I mean, in most applications we don't do this simple two-dimensional convolution. We do multi-channel convolution, which we are going to discuss in the remaining part of this section. Okay? Good. So just before we start, this is one example of a practical neural network, CNN, convolutional neural network. This is VGG16, quite well-known architecture, which is still used the vanilla, you know, feed-forward CNN without any skip connection. And as you can see, this guy is exactly doing the same thing as I told you. So you're going to get a bunch of convolution layers. So you have your input image. You do a bunch of convolution. Then you do one pulling, again a bunch of convolutions, one pulling, and so on till you get into what you need. You know, a bunch of features which are enough now for you to just do the classification. And after that, when you get that, you know, this part, when you get into that output, which is what you're comfortable with, you're going to flatten everything, and now you pass it through multiple fully connected layers. And then at the very, very output, you have, for example, I don't know, if it is CFAR10, you have 10 different classes, right? Each of those classes corresponds to one of the objects inside your data set. So you start from the image, you train the whole thing, at the output, you have, again, a softmax. The maximum value is going to tell you what is the class of that image. So if it's cat, the class is going to be cat. If it's dog, the class is going to be dog, and so on. Clear? Great. So we're going to discuss this particular architecture later. Okay. So we're going to get all of those numbers. I mean, we get feeling about all of those numbers in this diagram. Great. Okay. So I'm not sure if you remember the story I started with this chapter. So the story of Hubble and Wiesel experiment, that they got a bunch of cats and they were just checking the visual cortex of the cats. So I mean, the idea that they developed there, and later on Fukushima just developed into a computational model, was pretty much the same thing. Yeah? So, I mean, you might be interested. You can check it online on Wikipedia, or I'm pretty sure there are a bunch of lectures online about this, so you can go through it. But the same thing, I mean, this is pretty much what I showed you here is pretty much the same thing as Fukushima said as the computational model of that experiment. Meaning that when you are looking into, or any creature is looking into something and is just getting a context out of it, the thing that is really happening inside your brain, or at least this is the way that we could understand it, is that you look at the whole thing at the output, and then basically your eye is just passing it through different neurons inside your brain. And each neuron is just focusing on one particular field of that image. And they are passing it through different layers, which in the Fukushima model is called simple cell and complex cell, S cell and C cell. And then those S cells are basically the convolutions, so it does multiple convolutions, and finally you get into a complex cell, which helps you to do recognition or identification of things. So when you are looking on I don't know if you really wonder, but sometimes you might, get back to yourself, how do I detect my own kid within a huge number of people? It's because somewhere in your brain you have been trained with your kid outlook, right? And then you just look at that, and those neurons are going to just send signal to your cortex, so you're going to understand, oh, there she is. Huh? You get my point? So this is basically what the biological vision model is. I've not been within the neurons of a human being, so I cannot say it. It's just a computational model that we developed to describe that, right? And this is exactly mapping, a sort of one-to-one mapping from that one to the true, artificial neural networks. Okay, so basically we just try to mimic what is happening in our visual system. So that's it. Let me just quickly go through this part, and then we're going to have a short break. Okay? So as I said, the main components of the convolutional neural network, one of them is the convolution, or basically a convolution layer. So this is the key component. It's going to have a filter or kernel. This kernel is going to be convolved with your input, and then it's going to give you, as the output, a feature map, right? So this is the first layer, which we're going through it. And then we have a pooling layer. The pooling layer basically is a simple form of your convolution layer with a bit of more, maybe nonlinear operation. Like, for example, you can do maximization. Yeah? But what it does, again, it basically goes through what you got out of your convolutional layer. And then after that is just pull something out of it in a way that the main purpose, as I told you, is to just somehow smoothen what you have in your original feature map computed by the convolutional layer. And then the next part is the output FNN, the MLP, the fully connected neural network at the very output, which you're going to give everything to it once you are over with repeating convolution and pooling. Okay? And then we are going to just do every layer together today. Okay? So maybe we're going to have 5 minutes till 7, and then we start with each component, with those components. Okay, shall we go on? Okay. So now let's just formally go over this convolution layer once again. So as I told you, when you have one particular input, now in general you could have input which is not squared. I mean, you could have different number of rows and columns. That is not going to make you any trouble, right? Because you get the filter, you pass it, and then you just jump down with this stride and you keep on doing it, right? So you can't give any n times m input into this matrix, and you do the convolution by one particular filter w. I have never seen any application where you use filter to be non-square. Okay, so it's always f times f, but if you want, you can do it. Nothing going to happen, right? So it's a linear operation. Instead of f times f, you could have f times something else, right? But I have not seen it. It's the only thing, right? So I can give that filter with this stride and the input into the convolution. I'm going to get the feature map, correct? Now, this feature map, it's not hard for you to compute the number of rows and columns that it has. Now, probably you see what I'm doing right now. I mean, this is n minus f, so because when you keep on going, then at some point your filter is going to touch the wall here, right? And then you cannot go any more forward. So you're going to have n minus f, and then you divide it by a stride, and then you add 1 to it, right? So this is going to be the number of rows that you're going to have. So exactly the rows of your input somehow divided by s, right? So if you forget about that minus f plus 1, that, floor value, if you just forget about that, you're going to see that this guy is actually scaling by s, right? Meaning that if you just double s, this is roughly half. And it makes sense, because when you double the stride, you're just looking at the input image with the step size 2, so you have half number of features collected from that image. Same thing is happening to your number of columns. Again, the columns of the input minus the filter size divided by this stride plus 1. Yeah? But again, you don't need these formulas. I mean, in practice, you always have the idea. So if you want to compute anything, you can do it based on that. So, and now, as I told you again, I mean, this is basically the same thing as we did. So we have the receptive field of the input here, x, I, and j. You just focus on that one with your filter. You do the multiplication, and then you just do the summation, and that's it. Yeah, that is going to be your output at particular I. Okay. Now let's do it once with the general w and x. So you have one x here. As you can see, you have 4 different rows and 5 different columns, so I don't have any square matrix anymore. And now what I'm going to do, I want to just convolve this x, this input, with this filter, right? So the first part on top left corner, this is the receptive field 1, 1. And then I'm going to get this w. I multiply this w with x, 1, 1, that receptive filter, entry-wise. Meaning that w1, 1 is going to get multiplied to x1, 1. w1, 2 gets multiplied with x1, 2. w1, 3, or no, we don't have it, w2, 1 is getting multiplied with x2, 1. w2, 2 multiplied with x2, 2, correct? Once you multiply everything, you sum them up, and then you're going to write it down here. This is your z1, 1. Yeah? If you want to compute z1, 2, you're going to do the same thing. This is your receptive field. You're going to multiply it with this filter. Entry-wise, you write it down here. Same thing for z1, 3, and you keep on going till everything here is filled, right? So every time you just go on the particular receptive field, and then you just do the multiplication, do the summation, and then you can fill out your feature map. Clear? Now, we can just check together the formulas I showed you in the previous slide. The number of rows we have here. What is it? It's 3, right? So you can simply see. I mean, the original guy has 4. 2 is the size of your filter. 4 minus 2 divided by 1. 1 is what? What is 1? Stride, great. And then you add 1 to it, it's going to be 3. Yeah? Same thing with the number of columns. So you have 5 columns in the original guy. You have filter of size 2, stride 1, it's going to be 4. Yeah? But you don't really need those formulas. I mean, when you just slide the filter, you're going to see how many entries you have. Now, let's do one numerical example that you get the idea clearly. So say this guy is my filter. So my filter is very simple. It is 2 by 2. It has the values 1, 0, 1, 1. And now I want to just convolve this guy by stride 1 into that image, okay, that particular matrix. Now, how do I compute the first entry? Can you compute it for me? I mean, you don't need to compute it. No, wait a moment. It's already there. It's 2.1. Just compute the next one, because it's not in this line. It's going to be, you just tell me what it is, and I'm going to write it down here. So I'm going to get this 1, yeah, when I just slide with the stride 1. This guy is going to get multiplied with what? 0.9, right? So 1 is getting multiplied by 0.9. What else? 0 is getting multiplied with what? 1.6, correct? So the entry here is 0 times 1.6. What about the entry in bottom left corner? It's going to be 1 multiplied with what? 0.2. So 1 multiplied by 0.2. What about this guy here? 1 multiplied with what? 0. 1 multiplied by 0. Then this guy is 0, this guy is 0. I just add up these two guys. Yeah? 0.9 plus 0.2 is 1, 1. So now I'm very nervous. So is it 1, 1? Yes. Okay. So that's you got the idea, right? Yeah? So now you're going to go over this guy each time. I mean, whenever you just stop, you just multiply. Basically here you have 0 here, so this is 0. You basically need to add up these 3 numbers, right? Here it should be 1.5, 1.2, and so on. You can go to the end. So everybody got the idea how we do the convolution, correct? Perfect. So that's it. Now, if I want to do it, for example, with the stride 2, as I told you, I'm going to jump, right? So this is my first receptive filter. What would be the next one? Or sorry, receptive fill. What would be the next one? It's going to be this part, right? So it's x1, 3, x1, 4, x2, 3, x2, 4. You see it? So you just jump by a step 2. So it's going to be your, I mean, this is basically convolution. You just look at it, multiply it, do the summation, you put it here, and then you jump with the step 2, right? So you're going to have 4 different values. And again, you can just check those formulas. You're going to see the number of rows and columns is fitting to the formula. Okay? Now, back to our example. If I want to compute the next guy, what it should be? So I'm going to get this filter. I just jump by step 2. I put it in the next receptive fill, which is going to be this part, right? 1.6, 0.30, and 0.5, right? And then what would be, after multiplying and summing up, it's going to be 1.6 plus 0.5, which is 2.1, correct? So if you jump, then it's going to be 2.1, correct? And now, if I want to go down, what's going to happen? Again, I'm going to jump with a step 2, right? So I'm going to just jump here, just sum these guys up. It's going to be 1.7. Jump here. I compute this summation, and that's over, right? Everything here. So I increase my stride. I reduce the size of my feature map, correct? Clear? Good. Now, let's just compare these two guys. And can you tell me whether you see any pattern, any connection between these two? OK, 2.1 is here, 2.1 is here. Now, if I jump with the step 2, then it's again 2.1. Here is 2.1. Now, I jump down from this one with the step 2 is 1.7. OK, 1.7. I jump with the step 2 is 2.5, 2.5. Right? Clear? So I get this guy. This is basically the downsampled version of the other one with stride 1. Clear? You see it? So if I just, in this guy, if I jump, if I downsample, this is what we call it downsampling. If I just start from the first one, each time I just ignore the next one, go for the second next one, right? Then I'm going to get this guy. So this one is, the right one is the downsampled version of the left one. So this is what we call a downsampling with factor 2. In general, you can have downsampling with higher factors. So if factor 3, then you start here, and then you just ignore these two. You jump here when you are doing it with factor 3, right? But one thing that you can conclude is that when you are doing convolution with a stride more than one, so a stride 2, a stride 3, a stride 4, it simply means that you did the convolution with a stride 1, and once you got the output, you just do the downsampling on it. Yeah? It's the same thing. Clear? Now, just to make the idea of downsampling clear, say I'm doing the downsampling with factor 2. If I do that, it means that every 2 columns or rows, I'm going to just ignore one of them, right? So I start with the first one, then I jump to the second next one, then again jump to the second, and so on. When I want to come down, I do the same thing, correct? Yeah? Now, if I want to do the downsampling with step 3, what I'm going to do, I am going to just ignore every 2 rows after each, every 2 columns and every 2 rows after each row and column that I have. Clear? So this is factor 2, this is factor 3, right? And as I told you, when you are doing convolution with a stride, so if I'm doing a convolution with a stride S, it simply means that I'm doing convolution with the stride 1. And once I'm over with the convolution, then I do the downsampling with factor S. Clear? Yeah? Now, you might ask me why we are doing this. So as you're going to see, this is going to make the life much easier, because you don't need really to think about a stride anymore. Okay? So let's make one increment here. So from now on, I'm not going to put a stride here. I mean, if this is something very specific that I need to put this stride there, then I'm going to put stride equal by that. But in general, when I don't mention any stride in this convolution, if I write something like this, I simply mean convolution with a stride 1. And the reason is clear to you, because when a stride is more than 1, you simply just get that thing, and then you do the downsampling. Clear? So whenever you want to do a stride more than 1, you just add 1 downsampling after the convolution. So you might wonder why I'm doing this. So one main reason is that this is going to help us a lot when we want to do the back propagation. Because in the back propagation, we really don't need to just focus about convolution with the generalized stride. I always can just back propagate over convolution with the stride 1. And then I just need to know what is the convolution, back propagation over the downsampling, as we're going to see. Yes?
We see the approach that we start with, for example, the 1 step, and then we increase in the 2 and 3 and so on. I was wondering if we start with the 3 and then try to upsampling.
No, we're going to talk about the upsampling, but you don't do the upsampling after that. You do the upsampling before that, before convolution. We're going to see it. This is the convolution with a stride less than 1.
Yeah, I mean, we find a way to just focus on the pixel that we are looking for.
Exactly,
yeah?
exactly. That you can do.
Yeah.
I mean, this is actually the more important reason that I put this sampling here. Because when I just define the sampling, it is easier for me to tell you how you can do this convolution with a stride less than 1. I don't know. But we're going to talk about it right now. But I don't know if you got any question. Everything is clear? So, yep.
I mean, if we use this way to add the stride into it, our life is easier. But then we add a lot of computation, because if we downsampling, we add a stride, we don't care about the
sure. If you want to implement it, then you are going to do it really with the stride. That's right, yeah, because you don't want to do the extra computation. But when you want to analyze it, when you want to study what is happening in your neural network, this is the easier way, and this is exactly the same thing, right? So that making it computationally efficient is something else, right? But I mean, at the end of the day, you are going to use PyTorch, right? Or any application like that. And that is implemented in the efficient way, right? But you can always think of it as you have done the complete convolution, and then you do the downsampling. Yes? Yes?
Does that actually create extra, if we do stride one and then downsampling, does that actually make computation more like difficult? Because like we are calculate the original thing in parallel anyways, so it just wastes some memory, it does not even waste computing time, right?
It's, yeah, I mean, you can waste, yeah, of course, some memory, this is right, but this is, I mean, what I try to explain. Like, at the end of the day, I mean, your computer is not doing this. Your computer really just jumps with a stride 2 whenever it needs, right? And does the computation. Yeah? So it really does it like this. So this is what your computer is going to do. This is really what computer would do. Okay?
Yeah, but if you try to do it in this way, then you are doing it serializedly, and it's not as efficient as to just do everything in parallel and multiply another.
Oh, I see your point. I see your point. Yeah, but you can do this one also in parallel, right? Because you can get your filter and then you just make your recipe.
So that's the point. You only waste memory. You are not wasting computing time. You do
Oh, yes, you're right. I got your point now. Yeah, of course. Yes. Yeah. When you implement it with parallel computation, that is correct. Yeah, you only just have extra memory, which you just save things and then you throw them away. That's correct. It's not a big deal. But in practice, I mean, really, you can do this for computation, really. But the point is that, I mean, it's easier for us to think of it like this, right? So that we are doing the first with the stride 1, and where am I? Yeah, with the stride 1, and then we do the downsampling. But I guess, like in most, hardcore implementation, it's sort of like really jumping with a stride. I guess. I mean, maybe I'm mistaken. I don't know. So, any questions? Everybody's clear? So I'm going to close that door because since beginning it's just making me, I know I'm obsessed, sorry. But that is taking my concentration. That was, I mean, I used to didn't have microphone back to then, okay? And the lecture hall was big, so I was just yelling. And once I was teaching, someone came here and said, "Could you please?" So it was stuck in my mind, so this was the reason. Anyways, so now here. So as I told you, so one of the main reasons that I'm doing it is because I want to do I can use this approach in order to define a stride which is smaller than 1. So to do that, let's just define the operation upsampling as well. So how can I do the upsampling? So if I have this one, I want to upsample it with factor 2. What can I do? I get the first guy here on top, this blue one. I keep it, then I add a 0 next to it, right? Then I put the pink one, put a 0, and then I put that last one, I don't know, that light gray one, and then 0, right? So this is going to be your upsampling, okay? So you add a 0 after each guy, and also you add a 0 below each one, right? So you could add 0 here, but we usually don't do it. But as you're going to see, it's not important because we always can pad 0 wherever we want. Yeah? And now, this is the upsampling. So every entry that you have inside your matrix, you can add f minus 1, 0 after it, f minus 1, 0 below it. And then this is going to be the upsampled version. Okay? And now, if I get the upsampling, then what I can do, I can get one input, and then I can increase the size of my input by that factor. Yeah? So if I upsample with factor 2, I roughly increase the size with factor 2, correct? And now what I can do the upsampling, I get the larger input, and then I do the convolution on that, okay? Now, if I do this, this is pretty much what your friend already said. So what I am going to do when I do the convolution? So if I am doing on this image here, convolution by filter of size 2, what's going to happen in each observation of my filter? Each time that my filter is just sliding on this input? Yes, but yes, of course, but your filter first is simply on this, 2 by 2 field, correct? And in that one, how many pixels of your input you have? 1, correct? So if you do that, then you are zooming inside your image, right? So you don't make your filter to compete, because if your filter wants to operate on this one, it is going to just focus on these 4 pixels, correct? But now, when you are doing convolution by the same filter, now here is just focusing on this blue pixel.
Oh, so if the image is too small, let's say, you would do upsampling and then...
Exactly. So you can do the upsampling. This is going to just make you focus on one particular part of your image, right? And if you do that one, this is what we call it the fractionally strided convolution. So what do I mean by a fractional? If I give you one value of stride s, which is smaller than 1, but 1 over s is an integer. For example, a stride half. Then 1 over s is 2. What do I mean? I simply mean that I do upsampling with that factor 1 over half, which is 2. And then I do the convolution with the stride 1. Clear? And what is happening? So exactly this is happening. So I'm adding 0 next to every single pixel because I want my filter when it starts just scanning my image, focuses on pixels more efficiently, right? So every feature that I compute after convolution is proportional with only 1 pixel, not 4 of them, right? Yes? Sorry? Yes, of course, of course. That is going to happen. You could have one particular receptive field where you have only one of those pixels in it, in this example. I'm not talking about general example, only in this example. But what you get at the output of your convolution, is going to be a larger feature map, and lots of those feature maps depend only in 1 pixel. I think in this particular example, all of them depend only on 1. Yeah, I cannot think of any case where you have multiple pixels involved, right? But this is the main purpose of doing the upsampling, because I get the image. If I wanted to get this image and I do the convolution over it, what I'm going to do, I'm going to get my filter, and then I multiply it in the first receptive field, correct? Meaning that I'm going to get these first 4 pixels into my receptive field, I multiply it with my filter. And then I compute the feature, correct? So my feature is going to be the function of all of those 4 pixels. Whereas if I do the convolution on this x tilt, the thing that is happening is that the first feature that I'm computing is only the function of the very first pixel, correct? No, I have more features, and each of them is more focused on one particular part of the image, right? So everybody's clear? Yeah? Yes?
In real use case, do we actually always pad in 0, or we repeat that pixel or do something else? Because like if you train your kernel on detecting some kind of features, but like if you pad 0 everywhere and only leave a couple pixels at the corner, it will always output
0 for that ones, yes, but you have still 4 filter values, right?
Yeah.
So 4 weights inside your filter.
Yeah.
And then the first weight, first time is going to get multiplied with this one, right? And then when you slide next, then your top right one is going to get multiplied with the pink one. And then you go forward, again, top left is getting multiplied with pink one. So you get a richer amount of features, and each of them is computed with one of those weights. And when you are doing the training, you have 4 degrees of freedom instead of 1. Correct? And then you are training all of them. So this is going to be more efficient than simply just putting one weight and passing it through it. Yeah? So, any questions? So, if I tell you I am doing the convolution with the stride half or 1/3 or 1/4, now you have the idea what I'm doing. I basically pad some 0 in between, and then I do the convolution. Correct? Great. And then you can actually talk about any fraction of a stride. So I can say I'm doing the convolution with the stride 2/3. Yeah? And what do I mean? I mean that I first do upsampling with factor 3, the one in the denominator. Yeah? And then I do the convolution. And then after that, I do the downsampling with factor 2, the one in the denominator. Clear? So this is going to be a general form of convolution. So moral of a story, when you have one stride, it's basically a resampling. If it is smaller than 1, then it's going to be, if it is integer more than 1, this is simply downsampling. If it is 1/1 integer, this is going to be the upsampling. And if it is a mixture of these two, any fraction, so it's a mixture of upsampling and downsampling. You can always forget about it. I mean, it's something that you add before and after your convolution. Only one point that you should pay attention, upsampling is always done before your convolution. I mean, it doesn't make sense to add 0 after convolution, right? So you always do it before convolution, so you want your weights to get multiplied with them. But downsampling is always done after convolution, right? Clear? So that's it, and it is going to help us a lot when we get into the backpropagation. So when you want to train a convolutional neural network, you can simply forget about that stride. You can simply learn how you can backpropagate over a convolution layer, and then you're going to see that downsampling and upsampling is extremely easy thing to do to be propagated backward. Okay, any questions? Everybody's clear how we do the convolution? So hopefully it's now crystal clear, and if that's the case, then let me just talk about the padding or 0 padding. Okay? So one thing is that, I mean, in these examples that I showed you, even if I do the, even if we just, let me get back here, even here. Even here that I'm doing it with a stride 1, yeah? Even that here that I'm doing with a stride 1, here I have 4 different rows, 5 different columns, but at the output I have 3 rows, 4 columns, correct? So the output of my feature map, my output feature map, that guy is in dimension in general smaller than my input. And the main reason is that my filter is a bit wide, right, of width f. And then when it just comes here, for example, it hits the wall and then it has to go down, right? So it cannot go any more further. Now if I want to make this guy exactly as the same size as the input, what should I do? Pad zeros, right? So if I put some zeros here and here, then when I am here, I can go 1 step further, correct? And then I can compute 1 extra column. Again, when I get here, I can, after this one, if I have 1 0 row at the bottom, then I can just come 1 step down, right? And then I can fill 1 other row. And then this guy is now going to be exactly as the same size as the input, correct? So this is what we call it the 0 padding. And the main reason that we do 0 padding is basically to just adjust the size of the output, okay? So you might wonder, okay, why I need z to be exactly of the same dimension as x, yeah? There are a bunch of reasons. One of the reasons is that, I mean, if I put a 0 in the next column, I'm still computing something, right? Why should I miss that feature? This is one reason, yeah? The other reason is that sometimes we really need our feature map to be of the same size of the input. Because, for example, we want to compare what we see after convolution and what we see before convolution. For example, say this is Amni's image. You just convolve it with something, and now you get a bunch of features. Yeah? If you want to show it in the same form as the Amni's image, you need it to really be 28 by 28, correct? And to do that, you can just add a bit of zeros here at top in right and down. And then when you do this, then you're going to have same size image at the output. Clear? So if you want to do zero padding, you basically can add zero anywhere in the boundaries. You can put it on the right. You can do it bottom. You can do it left. You can do it at the top. Anywhere you can add zeros. And you should specify the size of your padding that you're adding those zeros. Okay? Now, one thing that is obvious here is that your pad size cannot be on any edge. Cannot be the size of your filter or more, because that doesn't make sense. I mean, you can add, but you're just collecting a bunch of zeros, correct? Because when you put your filter, it needs to have a part of your image within it, right, to compute something. If your filter is of this size and you add, here is 3, and you are adding 3 columns of 0, then definitely the first thing you compute in every row is going to be 0, correct? So you're not going to do that. So the number of useful zero padding columns and rows that you can add is specified by the size of your filter. Okay? So now if I add up, for example, PR on the right side, PL on the left side, then what could I say? I could say this new input, which has those columns padded into it, it's going to be of the size, same number of columns that it has, plus PR plus PL, correct? And then you can compute the size of your map or the number of columns in your map by replacing that M with that M plus PL plus PR in the formula I showed you initially. Okay? So you basically, if you have, for example, n rows, then the number of rows you add as 0 on the top and the number of 0 rows you pad at the bottom, they are going to be added to your n, and then you're going to compute the feature size, right? The number of rows in your feature. Same thing you can do with your columns. Okay? Left and right zeros added to your number of columns. Okay? And what you do in practice you always put all of them to be the same. Okay? So when you say padding size 1, you simply mean that every edge you are just adding 1 pad of 0. Okay? Around, all boundaries. You usually do it that way. Now, one thing that you should pay attention here is that in practice, when you read many information about implementations, you usually see that some of these parameters are being left. I mean, they are not mentioned in the description. But there is no problem, because these parameters are all related. For example, if you do know what is the number of rows inside your map, inside your feature map, and you do know what is the number of rows in your original image, and you do know what is your filter size, you simply can compute the number of zero pads, right? Correct? So there is no need for people to just indicate what is the size of zero map, but as long as you do have the idea, you can compute that one, correct? So, and usually people are very, very lazy, so they don't mention it when they don't need it. Okay? So you don't wonder if you see one implementation, what is the zero pad size. Simply just put it in calculation, then you find out what is the zero pad size. Okay? So here is the same thing that, as I say, if you do know input, output dimension, if you do know stride, if you do know the filter size, you really don't need to know padding length, because you basically can compute it based on this formula or based on the intuition you have. No? Great. So that's it. Now, here, if you look at the example that we had before, the good thing about, for example, zero padding here is that if you remember, when we wanted to do the convolution with the stride 2, we started with that field, then we jumped two columns next, then we did this one, then we couldn't go further, right? Then we came down, right? So this means that I'm missing this last column. But now that I do the zero padding, I can actually compute that one as well, right? And then I can go further right, so I have now one extra column here, and then I'm not missing anything in my input. Everybody's clear? Great. So now, I told you about the convolution. It is basically a linear operation because you get the filter, you multiply with your input, and then you add them up. This is same thing as you do in any neuron. So in any neuron, you get the inputs, you multiply them with some weights, and then you add them up, correct? So this is exactly what you're doing, but usually in neural networks, we activate them, right? So we talked about this. If we don't have any activation, if we are just dealing with linear operations, then this is basically not going to do anything for us, right? So we always need to activate everything, and this is the same thing with convolution as well, okay? So in the convolution, we usually get the activated version as the output of our convolutional layer. So the whole convolutional layer, so I should defend myself. I haven't defined convolutional layer yet. Yeah? So this is the first time you see it. I always talk about convolution. Okay? Now I'm defining the convolutional layer. The convolutional layer is convolution which is then activated. Okay? So I hope I could transfer this idea to you that convolution itself basically is a linear operation. And then once you do it, so this is exactly dual to what you do with a fine transform, yeah? And then once you do it, then you just do the activation, okay? So what you're gonna do if you want to have a convolutional layer, you first do convolution, which is a linear operation. Some people call it linear convolution because they want to make sure that you get the idea that there is no activation yet here. And I always talk about this, that you are getting X, you just convolve it with some filter, and that's it. Basically, you can add a bias to it, but we really don't do it, okay? But you can add a bias. You can keep one constant, and each time you multiply the filter into your receptive field and do the summation, add that constant also to it. Just do it if you want. I mean, this is one extra parameter you can learn, right? So you can do the convolution, and every single entry, you just pass it through with the given stride and the padding and anything. And then once you got your feature map, then the next thing that you are going to do, you are going to activate that one. You just get one activation function, you apply it on every single entry in this feature map. Clear? So it could be a ReLU function, it could be sigmoid function, anything that you want. Okay? So now, what you, for example, do if you have one MNIST image, you get your filter, and then you convolve it with this one. You can potentially add a bias. So this guy could be your filter. So basically, you go on 3 by 3 subfield of that original image, and then you slide one by one right and down. And once you're over, you can even add a bit of zeros here so that the output is going to be exactly of the same dimension. Once you computed that one, then you're going to get your activation function and apply it on that, which is going to give you, again, the same size map, but this one is now activated. Okay? And this is usually what you have in your neural network as a feature that in many visual scenarios, many visual cases, it has some connection to your target. Right? So you could just check, like there are a bunch of earlier studies and some even online apps where you can look at one neural network and look at every single feature map in between to see how it looks like. And initial ones are very close to the input image, but gradually they're going to get, scattered from that one. And some features are going to be focused on some part of your map, which helps you realize what kind of, for example, class this image belongs to. Okay? So that's it. You might ask me what is the activation. The classical one again is ReLU, but you can use any activation, so it's not a big deal. So that's it. Now, we got the convolution layer defined, so you give the input. This convolutional layer is going to do one convolution, and then you do the activation, you get your feature map. Yeah? But everything that I defined here was for the case where your input is a two-dimensional map, right? So you have one matrix, I mean X here, whatever I defined here, X here was a matrix, right? So X is one map which has some rows and columns. But in practice, you don't have a matrix as image, correct? So your image usually has multiple channels. Yeah? So, for example, say you have one colorful image, right? So I think most of you know it, that this one consists of 3 different maps. One of them is red one of them is the green one, and one of them is the blue one. And this is why we call these images RGB images, red, green, blue, right? 3 components, red, green, blue. Then when you just put them next to each other, then your eye is going to look at, see it as a kind of, colorful image, correct? So those 2D things that I talked here for you up to this point, they are what we call them gray images. Yeah? Basically, they have only spectrum of between white and black, right? You can change it. I mean, instead of white to black, you can make it white to red, right? White to blue, white to green, white to anything, right? But at the end of the day, it has just one spectrum, right? But the true images that we have are multidimensional. So it means that every single image that we look, they have multiple channels. All of those channels are of the same dimension, same matrices, same size matrices, but each of them contains different numbers. Yeah? And then if you, for example, put the spectrum white to red, this is going to be your R in the RGB images. If you put it white to green, it's going to be the green one. White to blue, it's going to be the blue one. And now these different numbers, if you put them next to each other and then you look at it, it's going to be the RGB image. Yeah? This is one example of the RGB image which has 3 channels. But you could have data. I mean, you don't need to always think about images. This is the best thing you can use, or best way of thinking of the input here in CNN. But your input could be even something more complicated. So it could have multiple channels. I mean, not necessarily 3. It could have 10 channels, 12 channels, right? So in general, we could have one input of dimension with C different channels, and this is what we call it the multi-channel input. Okay, and mathematically, if you want to define it, this is a tensor, right? So you're getting out of the vector matrix world, and now you're going for higher order tensors, right? You could have order 3 tensor, right? And when I say a tensor of, for example, if I say X is a tensor of size 3 by 4 by 4, what do I mean? I mean that I have a 4 by 4 thing. So here, this is the 4 by 4 thing. Yeah, this is one 4 by 4 map, correct? And then I have exactly the same thing behind it, and 3 of them I have, right? And now you can think of it as a cube. And the depth of that cube is C, okay? Now, how many numbers you have here? You have 16 numbers in each map, right? 16 here, 16 here, 16 here. So it's going to be 3 times 16. C times 4, 3 times 4 times 4. Or in general, C times N times M. Clear? Yep.
What's the difference between the tensor or the 3D matrix?
I mean, 3D matrix is what we call a tensor. I mean, same thing. Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, it's just a naming. No. I mean, but tensor in general, I mean, you can have order anything. So you could have, instead of order 3, I can make it order 4. And then it's going to be that one. And then, for example, if you have 2 times 3 times 4 times 4, then it's going to be that one, another one next to it. All right? And you can go even higher. So this is, for example, the case for RGB. Yeah? So for RGB, you have red map, you have the green map, and you have the blue map. Each of them is of the same size, for example, n times m, so n rows, m columns. And then you have C, three different channels, right? And these channels are next to each other. No? Okay, so now what can we do if we want to extend everything about the convolution that we talked today to the 3D case? Okay? So it might sound a bit complicated, but it's not. It's very easy. What you can do, you can extend everything in depth, right? So we always thought about a depth 1 up to this point. Now you can make it depth C. What it means. For example, if I want to convolve this image, which has 3 different channels, with a filter, I need to have a filter which has 3 channels. Okay? Now, if I want to convolve this guy, for the moment, just forget about those 2 channels backward and 2 channels here. So think of this image to be 2D, this filter to be 2D. What you're going to do? You're going to get your filter, you put it in the first receptive field, then you go for the next receptive field, and so on till you're over, right? Correct? You do the same thing here, but you carry everything in depth. Meaning that if I want to convolve here, I just make sure that my filter has exactly the same number of channels as my input. And once I have this, I can simply go on like this. So I get this guy. I put it here. So the first channel of my filter is getting multiplied with my first part of the image. The second channel goes to the first part of the second channel. And the third channel of the filter goes to the first part of the third channel in the input. Correct? So look at it here. I have this 3-channel filter. I just put it exactly next to each other on the channels of the input, right? Now, if I want to go for the next, now if I just multiply everything here to those values, I sum everything up and then I write it down here. Correct? And now, if I want to compute the next value, what I'm going to do, I'm going to just push it one step forward, right? So it's again a 3-dimensional thing. I multiply the receptive field in this whole 3-dimensional image with the 3-dimensional filter, and then again I sum everything up, I put it in the next point, right? I do it like this. So I keep on going like this. So everything is exactly as before, with this minor difference that up to this point we always thought about depth 1. Now you can think of depth C. Okay? So you got the idea?
We use the same filter for the 3 channels, for the different channels?
No. These are, oh, maybe I should have used different colors, right? But no, these are different numbers. No. It's not the same. So every map of the filter is something different. So here, for example, you have 3 channels. Each of them is 3 by 3, so it means that you have 27 different weights. Okay? Yeah. Sorry? Oh, I jumped. You mean the right one? Oh, yeah, you are right. There is a mistake, I think. No, it's not. It's not a mistake. It's correct. Because I jumped here. Was here, you see, I just shifted once right. I mean, I skipped one of them, so I didn't want to show this one. Of course, you just shift one, and then once you shift one, then you multiply everything, you write it down in the next point, but I just showed the last guy. Okay? Yeah, because at the end of the day, if you want to really know the feature, you don't really, I mean, if you look at your, I don't know, eye, or some, very high dimensional, high resolution image, then probably those red, green, and blue ones, they have very low correlation. So if you look at only, I mean, just imagine these, very specific ancient monuments or ancient diagrams where you really don't see, I mean, it's full of colors. Yeah? If you get those RGB parts, they are pretty much independent. But you want to just find out, okay, for example, at this part of the image, there exists that particular pattern. You really need the information about all the colors, right? And this is what you're doing here. I mean, of course, you could just get one filter and pass it through the first channel and then go for the next channel. This is what we call a 3D convolution. You can do it as well, but that is not going to be as efficient as this one. So for most classical approaches, you use this one. But if you have the idea that really I need to just scan every single channel separately, then of course you can do that one. Yeah. So, any question? So everybody's clear how we do the 3D convolution? So 3D convolution is basically the 2D convolution that we had up to this point with the depth being added. Okay? Now, again, you can just go ahead and write it down, so I don't need to repeat whatever I have done, so it's just for sake of completeness here. So everything is exactly as before. The only difference here is that in each slide that I'm doing, I consider all of 1 to C channels, right? So you really, I mean, in what I'm doing here, you really don't move in depth, right? You still are moving 2-dimensional. The only thing is that you compute everything in 3D. Clear? Great. Okay. Now, one thing, if I do this convolution in 3D, then the output feature map that I compute, what is it? Is it a tensor? Sorry?
After you add everything up to the feature map?
To the feature, yes.
Is a scalar, I guess?
Yes, and then this feature map that I collect, what is it? Is it a simple map or it's a multi-channel? It's still a simple map, correct, right? So if you look at this image here, you also see it, right? So I have 3-channel input. I convolve it with 3-channel weight or filter, but I get one map, right? So this one now is significantly smaller than in dimension than that one, yeah? But is it always a good idea to do that? No? Okay, this is nothing. So do you think this is a good idea to do that? I mean, if you do know that you are at the point where you really need to shrink every feature, this is right? But if you are starting with one image and you want to find out whatever exists in this image, this is not a good idea to get like 1,000 numbers and just reduce them to 100, right? Definitely you're missing something in between, right? So what we do really need, we really need to have multiple channels also at the output. And how we can do it, we can get multiple filters, correct? So I can have one 3-channel filter and convolve it with my input. I'm going to get one map, right? Then I get another 3-channel filter and I convolve it with my input. I get another map. And if I want to have more channels, then I'm going to add more and more filters, right? So this is what we're going to do it at the end of the day. So multi-channel convolutional layer, it's going to have multiple filters, so say k different filters, and each of them is of this form. So this is going to have exactly the same number of channels as your input. So if your input is C channel, it should exactly have C channel, every single of those filters. And then it has one specific filter size. You have k different of them, correct? And the thing that you are going to do, you get your first filter, you just convolve it with your input, you're going to get one map. You put it at the first map, you just get your second filter, you convolve it with your input, you're going to get your second map, and so on till the last map, map number k. Clear? And then your output is now going to be k channel tensor. Clear? So, and after doing that, you definitely need to activate everything, correct? So everything that you computed with that linear convolution, you're going to just add the activation layer to it to just make sure that everything is now nonlinear. Yeah? Any questions? Yeah. Sorry? Different activations? No. We usually do it just same activation for everybody. So activation, you really don't need to be picky with that because it's just to make it nonlinear. So you don't really need it. Design it that much. So this is, again, the idea. So just the visualization of what I said. So basically what I'm going to do, I'm going to get this input x. I just convolve it with w1, I'm going to get z1. I convolve it with w2, I'm going to get z2. And then I put z1 next to z2. Now I am going to have a two-dimensional output. Two-channel output. And then if last thing I do is to just activate it. I just get this ReLU function and apply it on every single entry in every single map. Clear? Yeah? Great. So, few things that you should pay attention always to is that the number of channels in your filter, it should be exactly the number of channels in your input. This is the first thing. You cannot, with the way that we have defined it, you cannot use different channel in your filter, right? If you have a 3-channel input, you need a 3-channel filter. Every single of them is going to be 3-channel filter. And then the next thing is the number of kernels. The number of kernels is the thing that is going to specify the number of channels you have at the output. Because now when you look at this convolutional layer, you get a multi-channel input, C-channel input. At the output, you're going to get a K-channel output, right? And this K is exactly the number of filters you have in your convolutional layer. Clear? And again, one thing that I wanted to just indicate here is that you do not necessarily have your input to be 3-channel because you could think that your input is the output of another convolutional layer, right? Maybe you had a convolutional layer which got the RGB image. It just converted it into a, 10-channel image, 10-channel feature now. And now you want to again pass this 10-channel feature from one other convolutional layer, right? Now the input is 10-channel now. Clear? So it's not necessarily 3. I hope you got the idea. So one thing else again, many times people do not show numbers. They miss some numbers in the diagrams, and you can simply infer it from the logic behind the layer, right? So here, for example, this is the input. It is a 3-channel image, 32 by 32 pixels. So this is, for example, the one you have in CFAR. Now, since it is 3-channel, what is the number of channels in your filters? It's 3, yeah? So you do know the number of channels in your filter should be 3, right? Now, the output is 4-channel, okay? Now, how many filters do you have in this convolutional layer? 4, right? Because the output is 4-channel. Now, you got 32 by 32, then you ended up by 28 by 28 map. Can you compute the size of the filter if I tell you that the stride was 1 and there was no padding? Definitely, yeah. You can compute it, exactly. So this is going to be the case. You would just see here 3. You immediately know that every single filter here is 3-channel. You see that the output is having 4 different channels, so you conclude that you have 4 different kernels. And also, you simply see this 28 here, 32 here, and I told you that the stride was 1, there was no padding, things like that. And then you can simply say that, okay, 32 minus something plus 1 should be 28. That thing should be 5. So my filter is of size 5. So if I haven't shown this value 4 by 3 by 5 by 5 here for you, you could simply infer it from the other numbers. Clear? This is why when people talk about convolutional neural network, they say we have the first layer with 5 channels. The next layer is 28 by 28 with 10 channels. They don't talk about the filters explicitly because they consider you attended my good lectures and then you learned how to do it, right? So, just moral of the story, when you read that, always try to use your intuition to find out whether you can find the missing parts in the design, okay? So that's it for today, okay? Great that I could just finish it. So next session on Thursday, we're going to just go for the pooling. And Bruce is coming, and that's it. So see you on Thursday.